welcome. How was lunch? I ordered the ziti. Did you try it? It's spectacular. So my final talk for the day is about simplicity and why it's the new feature. I write for the New York Times, as you know, and when you write for the New York Times, you get a lot of email. It is even worse when you are the tech critic, because your email address appears right at the bottom of every column, and I mean, you cannot use the word "the" in this column without offending somebody and getting hate mail. The New York Times, as a newspaper, gets 400 letters a day. I mean, the old paper kind. They used to put things through the mail. Too young. They're just like, I think you should know that when the semicolon follows the parenthesis, it goes inside the quotation mark. It's just like way too much time on their hands. But for me, I'll say, I got a new mouse pad, and they'll be like, what are you, in bed with the mouse pad industry? You shill? It's like, can you people get some outside interest? But anyway, one thing I get a lot of these days is complaints about hardware and software and how it doesn't work and how they can't figure it out. And I call it software rage. It's people feeling overwhelmed, technology changing too fast for people to keep up. It might be good technology, but without the supporting factors of tech support and customer service and time to adapt. Excuse me, I'm getting a cold faster than Amtrak. Then it all goes to hell. So, part of the problem is that technologies are in fact coming along faster and faster. If you do a really crude timeline of the invention of the major, media, you'll see that they had a while to adjust to paper before books came along. But now it's just coming out boom, 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 boom all the time. This next slide makes me laugh in a twisted way. This is an actual poem written by one of my readers and sent to me to express her frustration. She calls it Tech Terror. It all started simply enough. Telephone linked farm to family. Radio let us in on fun and fury. A few dials, numbers, and wires were easy to use, hard to abuse. Then came TV, turntable, and tape. Type, fax, copy, record, Xerox, computer, cell phone, CD, DVD, search, save, delete, rewind. Shoot me an email, I don't mind. Download an iPod, MP3, shuffle, link by DSL, cable, or Wi-Fi. Keep in touch on Facebook, watch my kids on YouTube. Blah, blah, blah. These gadgets and many more keep us connected to showroom floors. Tech terror strikes in all our hearts. Consumers forget passwords as they sup. Then they plead for Socrates' cup. Okay, so you're going to commit suicide because you can't work your DVD player? It's more serious than I thought. Well, I think it's charming that she's so terrified. But she does represent the public in a lot of ways. So but she's not alone. I once wrote in my blog about a bad experience that I had calling Dell tech support. And we all know, hello, this is Mike. How can I help you? Yeah. Sure, your name is Mike. Sure it is. Anyway, so within 12 hours of that blog post, there were 700 emails, posts on the blog from people with their own tech support horror stories. And clearly people are very, very frustrated with their tech and with getting help for their tech, with understanding their tech. And whoever figures out how to somehow tap into tech frustration and make money from it will be a millionaire. Oh, how'd that get up there? Just kidding. Okay. So part of the problem, ironically, is that in the old days, computers were technical, and everybody knew they were technical, and non-technical people did not use them. So it was DOS, it was memorizing commands, it was syntax, and everybody got that. They were for nerds, the nerds can have it. The rest of us will let the nerds do it for us. And then, Windows systems came along, the Mac, and later Windows, and the message was, now anyone can use these machines. Okay, that was the first mistake. This is, believe it or not, the first Mac OS. This is System 1. You'll note that the entire operating system fits in 211K. Today you could not put the Apple logo in 211K. That is astonishingly tiny. Then time went on, screens got bigger, color was introduced, multitasking came along. And so the irony is that as these things were billed as easier to use and simple and anyone can do it, that meant more and more clashes of the technically naive up against computers, which, no matter how you dress them up, are more complex than elevator buttons or something. One time I had the distinct pleasure of sitting in at the Apple Helpline Center in Austin and listen to an agent take calls from people. And I got a separate headset. I couldn't speak, but I could hear what was going on. And I will never forget this. You know how they say your call may be recorded for quality assurance? No. Your call may be recorded so they can collect the funniest dumb user stories and pass them around on a flash drive, which they do. And these are absolutely true. So this one guy called up and said that his computer would not boot up. And the technician said, well, sir, why don't you just make sure your computer is plugged in, first of all. He said, what kind of idiot do you think I am? Of course it's plugged in. And the technician said, well, please, sir, just do me a favor. Look back there and see if it's plugged in. And the guy said, I can't see anything behind the desk anyway. There's a power failure in the building. He couldn't turn his computer on. He couldn't. No, never mind. Anyway, that's a true story. Oh, another one is a woman called. This is one on the recording that I got to hear. A woman called tech support to complain that her mouse was squeaking. And the technician said, ma'am, how do you mean your mouse is squeaking? Well, yeah, it makes a squeaking sound when I move it. And the funny thing is, it squeaks louder the faster I move it across the screen. And the guy's like, ma'am, are you putting the mouse up on the screen? He goes, well, yeah, there's a message there that said, click here to continue. So I clicked there. What? You know. So it goes on. There was one where a guy called and said, my computer's frozen and I can't get it unfrozen no matter how many times I type 11. The guy said, sir, why are you pressing 11? He said, well, there's a message. It says, error, type 11. I'm typing 11. And my favorite one, this wasn't from Austin, but somebody told me about this, was the one about the guy had a laptop and called tech support to report that it wouldn't start up. And the only clue he had was that it made a sloshing noise when you tipped it. And the technician said, sir, you mean a sloshing noise? Like there's liquid in there? It's like, yeah. And he was like, well, maybe you should bring it in. I'll have a look. So the guy brought it into the shop. The technician takes it in the back, takes out the battery, and sure enough, like a quarter of a cup of clear, vile-smelling liquid pours out of there. And first he's thinking battery acid, and then he gets his buddies around, and they're kind of like, cat. It's cat. So he called the customer back and said, sir, do you by any chance have a cat? Because we think that, you know. He goes, no, I don't have a cat. I don't have any pets at all except for Fluffy. Fluffy's my rabbit. Funny you should mention Fluffy because he actually likes to sit on the keyboard where it's warm. And so the technician said, sir, well, I think Fluffy may have downloaded some incompatible data. And the laptop cannot be saved, and you're going to have to get a new one. And he called the customer back a month later to see how he was, to see how the new laptop was, and to ask how the rabbit was. And the answer was delicious. So anyway, so some of the problem is the novices that we are bringing in to storm the gates. But some of the problem is also design. Both parties can stand to be improved. I mentioned earlier that part of the problem is our insistence that we add more and more features to hardware and to software. We work in this country on this cycle of software upgrades. So when you buy a new software program, it's not like you own it. It's not like you bought a vase or a car. It's more like joining a club with annual dues, right? Because every year they're going to say there's a new version, and they're going to hit you up for 79 more bucks to upgrade to the latest version year after year after year. I know a guy who has spent over $4,000 just on Photoshop over the years, just keeping current, keeping upgrading. The software companies make 35% of their income just from selling you upgrades. The problem is that they have to put something new into the software to get you to buy the upgrade, which means that software can develop only one way, and that's more complex. That's longer lists of features, more buttons, more menus, more dialog boxes, more widgets. So I have this, and we do it. I call it the sport utility principle. It's the same reason people buy sport utility vehicles. You know, why? In case there's a flash flood on the way to the grocery store? It's like people don't need sport utility vehicles, but we like to surround ourselves with unnecessary power. That's like the philosophy why we keep upgrading even though we're perfectly happy with the version we got. We're afraid of being left behind, of being inferior people because we don't have the very latest. But the problem is what I call the software upgrade paradox. And that is that if you improve a piece of software enough times, you'll eventually ruin it, right? Like Word started out as a word processor, and now it does websites and does databases, and it's a floor wax, and it's gone way beyond its original purpose. So what's the alternative? I mean, maybe we should stop this cycle of eternal feature additions and charges. Maybe somebody should come out with like a word processor, like a Microsoft Word, that's just a word processor that serves the 95% of us who just need to make simple documents with formatting. Well, guess what? Microsoft did that. I don't know if you remember this. It was called Microsoft Write. That is precisely what it was, and it was a flop. Nobody bought it. It was a perfectly good piece of software. It was a total disaster because we like to surround ourselves with unnecessary power. So as we add features, we have to find a place to put them. I showed this hilarious slide in my earlier session. Eventually, you run out of space to put them. Microsoft did address this in the latest version of Word by repackaging all those buttons. They're all still there. It's still overwhelming. It's still confusing. They're just a bit more neatly organized. But the point is, it's dizzying. There is only so much screen space you can use as a designer to put all these buttons and menus. There are only so many design tools you can use. You can use menus, and then of course we eventually develop submenus and sub-submenus. We can put shortcut menus or contextual menus that pop up when you right-click. There's buttons and checkboxes, and there's toolbars. And that's your vocabulary. That's like pretty much it. And they all take space, and they all have to be hunted through, and they're all difficult to learn. So I'm about to start really wailing on some horrifying examples of bad interface design. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge publicly and in front of everybody that designing good interfaces that have a lot of features is really, really hard. I started out my career as a Broadway conductor, as I mentioned earlier, and I got involved with a software company that made a sheet music program called Finale. And today it's the industry-leading sheet music program, and it's used by all the professionals, but very complex. And also, in the early days, in the mid-'80s, very, very slow. So I was running it on a Mac SE, and when you do a musical score, so this is a full orchestra score, this is not multiple lines of music. This is one line of music. You know, Yankee Doodle went to turn the page. Okay? What we're seeing vertically is the flutes, the clarinets, the oboes, the strings, violin, viola, cello, the brass, and so on, all playing in unison. Are you with me? So understanding how a musical score works is very important. Okay, so the problem was that this is a huge amount of graphic information for a 16 megahertz computer like the Mac SE to display. So it was horrifyingly slow. You'd click to turn the next page, and you'd wait, and you'd wait, and you'd wait for this to paint itself in. So I was hired to be the manual writer for this program. I wrote the documentation, 900 pages for this program. And so I was in touch with the guy who was writing the program, and I said, Phil, I have this great idea. It's too slow to handle full scores, so what you got to do is you got to write this little program that will let us write the score in sections, right? So I can do just the first 10 measures in one file, and they'll be able to turn the pages much faster because it won't have to keep as much in memory. And then I can work on the next 10 measures in another separate file, and then when I'm all done, your little utility program that you're going to write for me will knit them all together into a finished score, and you won't have had to, and you can just print it, you won't have had to wait. Okay, and he said, well, I'm concerned about the interface design. And I'm like, no interface. Drag and drop. Just drag the files onto your little utility app that you're going to write for me, and it will spit out the finished file. And I thought I was such a genius. And he goes, okay, so the problem is, how does it know which file contains measures 1 through 10, which contains 10 through 20, and so on? You're going to need some kind of way to tell it the order. I'm like, okay, so you drag and drop, and then this box comes up with a list of them, and you drag the files into order and click Stitch, and it'll build that for you. He's like, okay, so you have a dialog box, right? That's the only interface? I'm like, that's the only interface. And he's like, okay, so no one would ever want to slice up the score the other way. Like just do the flute part in one file, and then just do the clarinet in another file, and stitch them together at the end vertically. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, so two dialog boxes, that's it. So one that tells you the order, and another one that asks you, do you want to stitch it together this way or this way? But that's it. And he's like, okay. So what would happen if one of the pieces you're stitching together is in the key of C, but the next one's in a different key? Aren't you going to need to tell it which is the real key that you want them all to be in? I'm like, yeah, okay, three dialog boxes, and that's it. Another one, and by the end of it, like in 15 minutes, he had basically tricked me into designing the worst piece of crap interface in the world. It was like dialog boxes nested and ugly lists. It was horrible. And he eventually did write the app, but in a much more elegant, beautiful way. And so it taught me that day that you can't just throw it together. It's really hard. It's an art. It's a craft, and that's why so few people do it well. So usually what we do now when there's a lot of options is we're in this world of matrices, right? So people try to make it simple for us by organizing things in rows and columns. This is the Mac's, control panel, and rows and columns, and you can never figure out, quick without looking, is network, would that be system or internet or hardware? I don't know. This is Microsoft Word's preferences dialog box. So we have a matrix. We have these buttons across the top, each of which changes this entire screen full of options. So there are hundreds upon hundreds of options, many of which I would challenge you are not necessary. In the spelling dialog box for Microsoft Word, have you ever seen the checkbox for use German post-reform rules? Sorry, we don't need that. Sorry. A big part of the art is knowing when to use which of your design tools. And I would submit to you that if you have only 4 choices, you don't need to hide them in a menu. Why, if I'm going to shut off my computer, why don't you just do this? You have the room. Why make me use my mouse to open a menu to see what options are hiding there, think about them, then click again to pick the one I want? Why not just have them all laid out like this, like the Mac does? I mean, this is not going to be a big anti-Microsoft screed. Well, yeah, it is. But so Microsoft's, for many years, Microsoft's attempt to simplify tasks has just been to spread them out using these wizards, interview screens that appear one after another. In Windows XP, it was really bad. There were so many wizards for every task. Remember the clean up your desktop wizard? Oh my holy God. So Bill Gates had this thing about he didn't want you leaving a lot of icons on your desktop. Steve Jobs has the same mania. They don't want stuff on the beautiful desktop. So after 60 days, Windows XP would tell you there are icons on your desktop that you haven't used in 60 days. Would you like me to get rid of them for you? And if you clicked yes, you would get a wizard. I kid you not. The first screen said, "Welcome to the Desktop Cleanup Wizard." Click Next to continue. You click Next. Now it says, "Would you like Windows to move the unused icons into a folder for you. You would click yes, and the third screen came up that said, Windows has just put the icons into a folder for you. Finish. We need a wizard for that! Come on! Anyway, it does approach a point of ridiculousness. I'm sure this is coming next. Welcome to the Type a Word Wizard. It appears that you're trying to type a word. This wizard can help you complete your cake. Click next to continue. Okay, I'll bite. So, all right. Sorry, just being assuming. So, what is the answer to the problem of too many features, too little space? Well, I have my philosophy. Consistency when possible. Make things work alike across multiple apps, across multiple operating systems. Keep the keyboard shortcuts the same. Real-world equivalents are usually good. A trash can to represent trash or recycle bin. Light switch to represent options or sprockets, that's a good thing. Labels, I'm a big believer in putting labels on cryptic icons. A little picture doesn't really help as much as a little picture with a thing that says erase or whatever. But I would encourage designers to break the biggest, to break any of these rules if they break the biggest rule of all, which is, for want of a better word, intelligence, common sense. Think about it. So here's the classic example. You are on the web. You are asked to input your country for the purpose of buying something or specifying what region, what language you are. So there are 220-something countries in the world. People say, oh, the internet is a global village. No, sorry, it's not. The internet is the United States, Canada, Europe, and Japan, pretty much. So why, in God's name, do I have to go to the end of the 220 countries to pick United States down in the U's? It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical when 70% of us are in the United States. It should be first, even though it's not consistent, it's not logical, it is intelligent to do that. So here's another example. When I print in Windows, this is what I get. So it's like the cockpit of the space shuttle. It's like, what do you think I want? I want one copy on my printer. You will note, by the way, that nowhere in this dialog box is there even a button that says print. Okay, why is the OK button in the middle? The default button should always be in the corner. It just, anyway, so what I've only seen this in a couple programs, I would like this. This is intelligent. I would like, unless otherwise told, I would like my program to print one copy on the main printer. That's it. So I get a lot of this philosophy about simplicity from my days working with Palm. I never worked for Palm. Oh, great. I've just pissed off the guy who designed the print dialog box. At Palm, I spoke there once, and this guy comes up to me and said, nice talk, nice to meet you. And I said, what do you do here? And the guy goes, I'm a tap counter. And I said, I don't understand. He said, well, the guy who runs Palm has this fetish on the Palm Pilot that no task can require more than 3 taps. It's a touch stylus thing. And if it requires more than 3 taps, it has to be redesigned. And he's maniacal about this. So they had this whole philosophy. This is a 160 pixel square screen they had on the Palm. So really difficult to design software. They hired this guy named Rob Haitani, who was a miniaturization expert from Sony. And he was used to miniaturizing music players and stuff, but he came to address the problems of miniaturizing software. They would have endless arguments about how to use those 160 pixels. For example, they decided not to have a border around the screen, because if you think about it, that's 2 pixels lost on each side, plus an empty row of pixels just inside it to separate it from the text. So that's 4 pixels lost on each side if you have a border. So no border. They would have these arguments about what functions on the screen should be in the menu at the top of the screen and what functions should be buttons. So, for example, when they designed the address book, If you look at your Palm or your Trio, which sadly that's all going away because Palm is dying and all that, but if you look at the way it was designed in the address book, the add button is on the screen as a permanent button, but the delete command is in a menu. So that's inconsistent, right? That's not consistent, but it is intelligent. We interviewed Rob Haitani for a book, and he'd say we'd be trying to decide if some function should be a button or a command, and the engineers would say, why does it have to be on the screen? It's only one more step if it's in a menu. And I said, okay, but how's your own desk organized? You have things on top and you have things in the drawers. That's because things on top of your desk you need all the time. Take your mouse and stick it in a drawer. Then anytime you need to use it, take it out of the drawer. It's only one step, but I guarantee it'll drive you crazy. So the reason the new button in the address book is a button is because you add people to your address book far more often than you delete people from your address book. Isn't that true? I mean, you only delete someone when they die or break up with you. It's just, but you add people all the time. So they actually got to the point. On the date book, I love this idea too. They don't have necessarily a time slot for every single hour of the day. There was an option not to show time slots where you didn't have anything. So that could collapse the 24-hour day and show you the whole thing on a single screen without scrolling. Very, very smart. Not consistent, but intelligent. And they had this expense tracker. And I used to race people to record a typical expense, like taxi, $12, today's date. And as soon as you started writing on the screen, it would create a new line for you. You don't need the new button, because if you're writing on the screen, what else could it mean but that you're creating a new record, right? So and it would put in today's date. What else? Of course, it's probably today that you made this expenditure. And then all you do is you write the first letter of a common expense, T for taxi, D for dinner, B for breakfast, I for internet, whatever. It would fill in the rest of the word, and then you write the thing. So you go like T31, and you'd have a complete record of the thing. So you could race a person doing it on paper and win every time. This Zen of Palm, as I call it, was later adopted in a lot of other gadgets where space is very constricted, like the BlackBerry and the iPhone. For example, you probably know on all of these phones, if you do two spaces, you get a period, so you don't have to switch keyboards to hit the period, and then automatically capitalizes the next letter you write because you're at the end of a sentence. So very smart. The tree on the iPhone put in apostrophes for you, because an apostrophe is another hard symbol to type on these little keyboards. So if you type D-O-N-T, what else could you mean besides don't? So it puts the apostrophe in for you. I love on certain phones like the T-Mobile, there's a dedicated @ key. Okay, the @ key on a smartphone is not an equivalent to the semicolon. It shouldn't hide away on some keyboard full of punctuation symbols. You use it all the time. So there should be a key for that. I adore that. Here's an example of software design where somebody was not counting taps. This is Microsoft Word. Suppose I want to create a new blank document. It could happen. So I go up to the File menu and I pick New, but I don't get a new blank document yet. What I get instead, on the opposite edge of the screen, I get this panel here. And somewhere in this panel, not at the top, by the way, is an additional button I have to click that says New Blank Document. So that's how I create a new document. So that is somebody not counting the steps. So we're getting worse for a while. The screens were getting smaller. The technology was advancing at a faster pace. People kept cramming more and more features into products. And to this day, if you read reviews of products, not mine, but Gizmodo and Engadget and TechCrunch, they are still reviewed on the basis of feature count. And I cannot understand that. I cannot understand that no one recognizes the price that is to be paid by cramming more features in. Complexity sometimes outweighs the benefit of the new features, I insist. But anyway, so what is going to turn the trend around? Is there any hope? Well, yes. There's a bunch of really great examples. The iPod started it. The iPod came out. It was not the first hard drive music player. It cost more, and it did less. It did not have a voice recorder. It did not have a radio. Didn't have a radio for years until last year. And yet it became the dominant player in the music player industry. Well, why? There's no other possible conclusion you can draw other than people liked that it was simple. People liked the instant mastery they had when they tried it out for the first time, or when they plugged it into the computer to synchronize it with their music collections, and it worked every time, and it worked the first time. People love that because they somehow think it's their fault in some way if tech doesn't go well, and it's frequently not. Apple has made this whole business of taking out features. You know, when the MacBook Air came along, it had like no jacks. It had one USB jack, no FireWire, nothing else, and then later this thing. The iPhone was creamed online when it came out. You couldn't change the battery yourself. Didn't have a keyboard, no memory card. You couldn't expand it. I mean, all this stuff it didn't have. And the blogs went nuts. They're like, this piece of crap, how dare they? Don't they understand those features have to be there? Well, no, they don't have to be there. And I would submit to you that it's the simplicity that made this thing this mega hit. 75 million they've sold in 2 years. It's unbelievable. This is what the iPhone is competing against. Okay, look at the design of these screens. And look at that. I mean, it's hideous. Okay, first of all, sorry, no cell phone should ever have nested submenus. It's an abomination. It's not allowed. You cannot have nested menus or submenus on a cell phone. This thing, okay, you tell me what I click to adjust the volume. I mean, come on. Nothing's labeled, even when it's highlighted. I don't know. That's terrible design. What even are those? What's the difference between this and this? I don't know. What is this going to do for me? I mean, come on. And then this, let's not even talk about that. This is just like monkeys released in a room. But people were using this stuff. People were actually trying to use these things. So anyway, so once the iPhone came out, suddenly every phone looked like the iPhone. Black slab, black slab, black slab, black slab, black slab. They all had touch screens. They all were like that. Not all were as simple, but clearly a nerve had been touched. People don't want to be overwhelmed by their phones. Everybody started doing that. I know I've used a lot of Apple examples and a lot of Palm examples. They're obviously not the only ones who do this. Google, I would submit Google became Google because of the fact they had a mandatory self-imposed limit of words on the home screen that survives to this day, 28 words. They will not clutter their home page with more than 28 words. And they have stuck to that. It's plain, it's white, nothing blinks at you. It is simple and obvious and easy to use. Sonos, you know, this company, these guys make this amazing wireless home system. So instead of hiring an installer for $1,500 to run wires through your house to make speakers in every room, you put these wireless speakers in every room, and then you have this handheld controller, or better yet, use an iPhone or an iPod Touch. They have the same software for free on that lets you very simply control what's playing in every room and what volume. It's incredibly simple to use, and people love it for that reason. TiVo, same thing. It's a very simple menu, and you always know where you are, and it's really easy to get back again. This may be the monster of the simplicity cult of all. This is the flip camcorder. This thing, it's a camcorder with no features. It doesn't even zoom. It has no menu. It has no zoom. It doesn't take still pictures. It doesn't have a memory card. It has one button, a big red button on the back, and that's start and stop. And then there's a play button. Start and stop and play. And this thing has completely eaten up the camcorder market. Do you know, as of last year, last Christmas, the flip camcorder had 33% of the camcorder market. This cheap plastic, no moving part, self-contained, idiot-proof camcorder. And you know, I'm a tech guy, but that's the one I carry in my bag because the 5-year-old's doing something cute in the back seat. I go, boom, boom, and I'm recording him. There's no, hold on, oh, is there a tape? You know, and I've missed it. You hit it and you hit the red button and you're done. And people love that. People love that they never miss the shot. The iPad is the classic case. This thing was also totally creamed by the tech cognoscenti who said it doesn't have a keyboard, it sucks, no memory card, blah, 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 blah. But people are saying that this thing is the ideal computer for old people. Because it's like the operating system isn't even there. There's nothing to it but tap up, there's one button, the home button, and it takes you to the list of all the apps. And then you tap that, and the apps are very, very simple. So for the very old or the very young, I mean, you should see my 5-year-old go with the iPad. I mean, he's like writing War and Peace on this thing. So why is it that having something be simple becomes these big bestsellers? This is Jeff Hawkins, again with Palm, but he once explained this. He was a brain scientist before he started in the electronics industry. And he observed that whenever we feel mastery over something right away, we are exhilarated. So he points out, imagine you tried golf for the first time, and the very first time you hit the ball, you got a hole in one. Well, you'd be like, this is a great game! I love this! Right? You'd feel like, I'm so good at it, it makes you happy. There's this famous story where the Palm Pilot did not have a keyboard, obviously. And so first they tried to do handwriting recognition. They tried to have you write on the screen with the stylus, and it would try to recognize your handwriting. This failed. I think history has shown it can't be done. The Newton failed. It actually works pretty well in Windows. And Windows' handwriting recognition is pretty good, but you hardly ever get a chance to use it because who writes on their screens? So he finally had this idea, what if we made you write your letters our way? What if we eliminate the variation in handwriting styles by dictating how you must write your letters? And so they made up this alphabet, the graffiti alphabet. Do you remember this? Where they were all, like the A was this. They were all block letters without the second stroke. So this was A, B was a B, C was a C, D was a... But the F was this. Leave off the second stroke. And so it was actually a little quicker to write with this lettering than with regular lettering. And the employees thought it was the stupidest thing they'd ever heard. Like, you're going to open this box and have to relearn the alphabet? It'll never fly. It's stupid. We quit. It's going to be horrible. Well, what happened? What's the first thing you did when you got... What's the first thing you wrote when you got a Palm Pilot? Your name. Everyone goes, David. And it recognized it perfectly because you're looking at the little cheat sheet and forming your letters the right way. And you'd be like, whoa, I love this, because I'm good at this. I learned something and I got it right the first try. He used that to manipulate people. And before you knew it, people would use graffiti as their regular handwriting. In the engineering whiteboards of America, I kid you not, you would see engineers writing with the graffiti alphabet because A, it was faster, and B, everyone else in the room was also an engineer, and they all knew the graffiti alphabet. So it was totally amazing. So this is why. So you feel good about yourself when you master something your very first try. Here's another example. This is the totally nail in the coffin of this argument. So here are the three big game consoles that compete. The Wii was the last to arrive, the Nintendo Wii. It looks so crude compared to the Sony, the photorealistic. I mean, look at you got like amputated weebles here. Like, they don't have arms. Their faces never move. The motion is crude. But the entire operating system, the entire control, is the Wii remote. This white plastic thing with 4 buttons on it. And you hardly, to play tennis, you don't press any buttons. You swing it like this. You don't press any buttons at all in most of the games. Compared with, look at the remotes for the other ones. We're talking buttons in the 30s. You can't even see all of them. They're on the outsides or on the bottom. And the Wii Remote, you hardly ever press any button at all. So obviously, the ones that look so much better and have so many more functions have got to be superior, right? Well, no, that isn't what happened at all. The Wii blew away those other game consoles year after year after year. Many, 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 many more sales, double or triple, year after year. For 3 Christmases, you could not get the Wii. It was sold out for 3 Christmases in a row. Because it was so simple. And I remember when we got the Wii, my 5-year-old, my older son, who was 5 at the time, and my dad, who was 80, were playing tennis against each other on the Wii on Christmas morning. There was no training. There was no press A, press A. None of that. Just this 5-year-old and this 80-year-old playing tennis. It was unreal. And then I have to insert a little rant about the user manuals. This is, as you know, a bugaboo of mine. I can't believe how horrible they are. And a big part of why they're so horrible is the way they come into existence. So a classic example, I wrote in one of my columns about this Nokia cell phone and how ridiculous it was that it took 4 steps to turn off the ringer. You had to bring up the menu, scroll down to number 4, hit enter, and there was a list of vibrate, silent, low, loud, whatever, off. And you had to scroll down, click that. It was 4 ridiculous steps to turn off the ringer, something you do frequently every time you go into a theater, movie, church, whatever. And I got this email from an engineer in, what is it, Sweden or Finland or wherever Nokia is, that said, oh no, you don't have to do that. You can just tap the power button. Don't hold it down, that'll turn it off. Tap it to bring up that menu of soft, loud, silent, ring, whatever. And I'm like, well, that's not in the manual. He goes, I know, it's kind of an Easter egg. Well, jeez! That shouldn't be an Easter egg! That should be on the front of the manual! And even so, better yet, it should be a freaking switch. It should be a switch on the side. It shouldn't be in a menu at all. So you can see that something happened with the pipeline of writing this manual where that became an Easter egg and not like the main way you turn off. And by the way, that wasn't one Nokia phone. That's all Nokia phones. They all use that. One press on the power button. I've just taught you something. Not like Nokia is a really big seller these days in this country. But anyway, so what about the language of the user manuals? This is an actual quote. The camera's battery while you concentrate on and do not open the door. The operation of the warranty and damage your liquid crystal display can be invalidated. What? So why do they sound like they've been translated through 3 languages on the way to us? Well, this too is often procedural. I had a fascinating email 2 summers ago from a guy at Samsung. He goes, hi, my name is Chris. I'm in Seoul, Korea. I am the department chair for our documentation division. And you keep making fun of our manuals in your reviews. And it's come to the point where it's costing us tons of money because we are getting so many help calls to helplines about stuff that's in the manual, but people just didn't get it, that it's really becoming a huge expense center for us. So you have this series of books called The Missing Manuals, and you wrote these dummies books. What would you say if we hired you to help us learn how to write better manuals? And I said, well, I'm not allowed to do that. That would be like conflict of interest if you paid me because I review you in the New York Times, so why don't I do it for free? If you came to my house, if you're willing to come all the way to Connecticut from Seoul, I'll tell you whatever you ask. So if you can believe it, these 6 manual writers flew from Seoul to Westport, Connecticut, and sat in my office in the attic, these 6 guys, for a day, and we talked about user manuals. This is where I learned why electronics manuals are so bad. This will blow your mind. Here is how Asian electronics companies write manuals. The manuals are initially written by the engineers who created the stuff. Okay, that's the first problem. Engineers are not people. Again, from my Palm days, I learned that when they were writing the software for the original Palm Pilot, the engineers were literally circulating their resumes to get their next job because they were so sure the Palm Pilot was going to be a disaster. And why did they think it would be a disaster? Here are these engineers, guys who sit all day in one chair in front of the computer going, why the hell would anyone buy a device that lets them carry around their calendar and address book? It's right here. They didn't get it because they don't live that lifestyle. They had no insight into mobile people who wanted to carry that stuff around. It's the same thing here. These engineers are writing about stuff on these washing machines and camcorders and computers with no insight into how a normal person would use these things. Okay, so they write it in Korean. Then they send the Korean documents to a firm in London who translates it into English without ever seeing the product. They ship it back to Korea for a last look. It is published, sold to the United States, where people look at it and throw it in the ocean. So it's written by engineers in Korea, shipped off to a translation firm in London who's never seen or used the product to do a rote translation into English, shipped back, printed, and that's how we get them. It's insane. So my suggestion was hire an American tech writer. There are many of them to write your manual, work with the engineers, blah, blah, blah. And they said, but timing, we can't like wait. We have to have the manuals ready when the product's ready. And I said, well, fine, go to Amazon, see who the computer book writers are, hire them to come to Seoul for a summer and work on the docs while you're developing the product. And you know, that is what they did. And Samsung's manuals are so much better, the ones from last year and this year. So anyway, so here is one more suggestion, and this is a slide I made for when I spoke to the, if you can believe it, the American Society of Technical Documentation Writers. Sorry, Society for Technical Communications. That there's an actual society for people who write documentation manuals for tech products. And my suggestion was you can start by quitting with the jargon. Every jargony word, there's a good English word that could replace it. So I hate when they say, I hate when they say, open the web page and read the content. No, it's not content. It's an article. It's words. It's pictures. Or they say, load up your iPod with content. No, if you mean music, say music. You know, it just drives me crazy. No one in real life says content. Great speech. I love the content. No one talks like that. Dialogue. They say dialogue when they mean dialogue box. Dialogue box is a bad enough term as it is. It was meant to indicate that the user interface is communicating with the user, but that was never intended to be a term for the public. I can't stand when they use display as a transitive verb. So they'll say an error message will display. No, sorry. Display takes a direct object. An error message will display what? A peacock? No, it has to display something. You don't use display when you mean appear. Okay, so DRM drives me crazy. DRM means copy protection. Does that song have DRM? Does the video you bought from the iTunes store have DRM? But it started out, it used to be called copy protection, which is what it is. And then the record companies and movie companies tried to call it digital rights management. It's a euphemism by the movie and music companies to make it seem like it's not so bad. Why should we buy into their spinning us? Why should we call it? No, that's a manipulation of that they're trying to spin us, and here we are giving them credence by using that term. Don't use DRM. It's copy protection. Call it what it is. I hate enable this feature. Say turn it on. Functionality. Functionality? Who uses that? Oh, I love this new bottle. Look at this functionality. No, it's a feature. Call it a feature. LCD, call it a screen. PDA, come on. PDA is a public display of affection, and that's it. Price point. What? Price is not long enough? What's the price point? No, what's the price? Call it a price. URL, people don't know what that means. Say web address. It's a web address. SMS, come on. They're text messages. You're just trying to lord over other people how smart you are, and you look silly. I also hate when they use support as a verb, as in, this camera supports Wi-Fi uploading. What do you mean it supports it? Does it earn a living and give the money to that feature? No. It means it offers this feature. It offers real-time streaming. Don't say it supports it. And user, meaning you. Look, there's only 2 industries in the world that refer to their customers as users. You know what I'm saying? And one of them is the computer industry. No, say you. Don't say the user may implement the Freen mode. No, say you can turn on Freen mode. And then you have to explain what that is. So my final advice for you in the audience, if you're an ordinary person, if you're a consumer of this stuff, if it doesn't work, don't assume that it's your problem. Frequently, it's the way it was designed. And be aware in life of when design is good and when it's bad. It's not often your problem. And if you are among the people who design this stuff, and I know a lot of you guys are, well, remember, making it easy is hard. Making it easy for the end user is difficult. You have to remember me with that music program. It's hard. Please, pre-sweat the details. Think ahead. Should the OK button be in the middle of the dialog box, or should it be in the corner? Think about that stuff. Because every work that you do is going to be multiplied by 200,000 when it gets out into the marketplace. So why shouldn't you put in 1 man-hour to fix something that will cost the world 200,000 man-hours? Count the taps. See if there's a way to shorten the number of steps. The art is not knowing what features to add. It's knowing what to leave out to make the thing more pleasurable to use. And above all, as these examples have shown, simplicity sells. So there's my simplicity rant. Any questions? Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming. Nice to meet you all.